So in this lecture, we're going to take a look at overriding code-first conventions using Fluent API. In order to use Fluent API, we need to override on model creating method in our DB context. This method is defined as virtual in the base DB context and is called at the time that the DB context is being initialized. So this is a good opportunity for us to supply additional configuration to override the defaults. Now, in terms of mechanics, we use the model builder object that is passed to this method. Model builder has a few methods, but the one we use quite often is the entity method. This is a generic method that takes the target type. In this example, we're calling the entity method, passing course as the generic parameter. Now, this method returns an entity type configuration object that we use to supply configuration for this entity, for the course class. So here's one example. If you want to override the name of the table in the database, we can call the toTable method. If we want to change the name of the schema for this table, we can supply that as a second argument to this method. Next, to configure primary key, we use the hasKey method. Note that this method takes a lambda expression. So here T is short for type. Or we could use B as in short for book. What if our entity needs a composite key? Then we can call the hasKey method, and in the lambda expression, we use an anonymous object and supply the name of properties. So in this example, our order item entity has a composite key on order ID and order item ID. Now let's take a look at column names. So again, we start with the entity method, and then we call the property method. Again, this method takes a lambda expression that determines the name of the target property. And then we chain another method. So we call hasColumnName method. If you want to change the type of a column, again, start with entity, then property, and call hasColumnType method. And as an argument, you specify the name of the target type in SQL Server. We also have a method for changing the order of columns. So you can call hasColumnOrder and supply the order for this column in the table. If you want to turn off the identity column, you can call hasDatabaseGenerated method. This method takes an enumeration, which is database generated option, as I explained in the last lecture. In the last lecture, I told you that if a property is nullable, Entity Framework marks that property as nullable in the database as well. If you want to override that, you can call isRequired method. If you want to change the length of strings, we have a method called hasMaxLength. So in this example, I'm limiting the length of the name property or the name column to 255 characters. We also have a similar method called isMaxLength. I think the name for this method is a little bit strange because I personally expect a Boolean value to be returned from this method. It's like we're asking a question. But in this example, calling this method on the description property sets the type of description column in the database to n varchar of max.